where you are, even if you're far from Tucson. If you see anything, if you hear anything, if there's anything at all that seems strange to you, that you report to law enforcement. We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
A daughter's desperate plea ahead of a looming ransom deadline.
2 hours ago at 5 o'clock, that deadline passed. A deadline set by someone claiming they're holding Nancy Guthrie captive. For hours, investigators, family, and an entire community waited, watching the clock, wondering what would happen when the time ran out.
Now, 2 hours later, we know this much. The deadline has passed and the questions have not. Over the next half hour, we'll walk you through what's confirmed, what remains unclear, and why similar cases from the past still shape how investigators move forward tonight. Hello, I'm Kariba Devine.
And I'm Mark Curtis. Nancy Guthrie was last seen on January 31st when she was dropped off at her home shortly before 10 o'clock. When she didn't show up at church the next morning, the family was notified and they reported her missing, and police began an exhaustive investigation.
Now, according to investigators, the doorbell camera was disconnected at 1:47 on Sunday morning. At 2:28, Nancy's pacemaker was disconnected from her phone. The 911 call from family was received at 12:03 p.m. and police arrived at 12:15. The family has made several direct appeals to the public, or to the people also, who may have taken their mother.
All right, so let's look back. The first video was released last Thursday, another on Friday, and then still another on Saturday, ahead of today's latest video. Let's take a look at those videos, starting with the first one.
On behalf of our family, we want to thank all of you for the prayers for our beloved mom, Nancy. We feel them, and we continue to believe that she feels them too. Our mom is a kind, faithful, loyal, fiercely loving woman of goodness and light. She is funny, spunky, and clever. She has grandchildren that adore her and crowd around her and cover her with kisses. She loves fun and adventure. She is a devoted friend. She is full of kindness and knowledge. Talk to her and you'll see.
The light is missing from our lives. Nancy is our mother. We are her children. She is our beacon. She holds fast to joy in all of life's circumstances. She chooses joy day after day, despite having already passed through great trials of pain and grief. We are always going to be merely human, just normal human people who need our mom. Mama, if you're listening, we need you to come home. We miss you.
Our mom is our heart and our home. She is 84 years old. Her health, her heart is fragile. She lives in constant pain. She is without any medicine. She needs it to survive. She needs it not to suffer. We too have heard the reports about a ransom letter in the media. As a family, we are doing everything that we can. We are ready to talk. However, we live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her. We want to hear from you, and we are ready to listen. Please reach out to us. Mommy, if you are hearing this, you are a strong woman. You are God's precious daughter, Nancy. We believe and know that even in this valley, He is with you. Everyone is looking for you, Mommy, everywhere. We will not rest. Your children will not rest until we are together again. We speak to you every moment, and we pray without ceasing, and we rejoice in advance for the day that we hold you in our arms again.
Where that video feels like it was ages ago, it really wasn't. As you can see, Savannah was joined by her sister Annie and her brother Cameron in that video. And the next day, Cameron released a video.
This is Cameron Guthrie. I'm speaking for the Guthrie family. Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you. We haven't heard anything directly. We need you to reach out, and we need a way to communicate with you so we can move forward. But first, we have to know that you have our mom. We want to talk to you, and we are waiting for contact.
And then on Saturday, the siblings once again reached out to the people who are holding their mother.
We received your message, and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay.
Ahead of today's deadline, Savannah released a new video asking for the public's help to bring their mother home. And as you just heard, Savannah Guthrie previously said that she was willing to pay. But according to TMZ, no transactions were made before today's deadline.
And it's important to point out that the FBI still hasn't verified if those ransom notes are even real. 12 News journalist Gabriela Becerra is live outside of Nancy's house with a new video from Savannah Guthrie. Gabby?
Well, Mark Caribe, this video that was posted today is different from the ones we just played for you in the sense that this time Savannah wasn't addressing her mother's possible kidnappers, but rather everyone else. She's pleading for help finding her mother as the search continues into a second week. The clock is ticking in the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie.
We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
Today's show host Savannah Guthrie sharing a fourth video on Instagram since her mother is suspected to have been kidnapped from her Catalina Foothills home in Tucson on February 1st.
She was taken and we don't know where.
This latest video comes just a few hours before a deadline expired in a possible ransom letter, demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin in exchange for Nancy's safe return. But the FBI still hasn't shared if they believe the ransom to be real or a scam. Now, 1 week after it was sent to multiple Tucson news outlets and TMZ. According to TMZ, the ransom has not been paid, things Savannah didn't address in the video, despite previously vowing to pay it.
We believe our mom is still out there. Law enforcement is working tirelessly around the clock trying to bring her home, trying to find her.
The Pima County Sheriff's Department has not identified a suspect or person of interest in the case. The FBI shared this statement with us on Monday. For more than a week, FBI agents, analysts, and professional staff have worked around the clock. Additional personnel from FBI field offices across the country continue to deploy to Tucson. We are currently operating a 24-hour command post that includes crisis management experts, analytics support, and investigative teams. Savannah is pleading for help bringing her mom home.
I'm coming on just to ask you, not just for your prayers, but no matter where you are, even if you're far from Tucson, if you see anything, you hear anything, if there's anything at all that seems strange to you, that you report to law enforcement.
And I reached out to the FBI after Savannah posted that latest video, and they tell us they're not aware of any ongoing communication between the Guthrie family and possible kidnappers. They tell us they also have not identified any suspects or people of interest in this case. Again, I want to remind you that there's a $50,000 reward to anyone who helps bring Nancy home or anyone who provides information that leads to an arrest in this case. Anyone with information is asked to contact the FBI directly at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Live in Tucson, Gabriela Becerra, 12 News.
Gabby, thanks. Earlier today on 12 News at 4, before the ransom deadline had passed, Troy Hayden spoke with a former FBI agent, John Iannarelli, to take a closer look at the facts that we know so far.
I've seen my share of kidnappings in my law enforcement career. This one, the fact that the ransom note comes in and goes to major outlets like TMZ is something you don't normally see. When someone's taken for a true ransom, there's communication fairly quickly, and a communication pipeline is established so that the kidnappers can get what they want, which at the end of the day is usually about payment. You'll see terrorism cases where they have political motivations. That's the kind of thing where you go to the media. But here we're seeing the opposite happen. That leads me to believe there's more going on behind the scenes. The people here, they need to show some proof of life, need to give out information proving they were on the inside of the residence, have Miss Guthrie, and that they're willing to resolve this matter. At this point, I think you're seeing some of the desperation that family members can feel in a situation such as this. Calling upon the public, any bit of information could be that key that can solve this crime. Kidnappings in this country are all over the map. There's not a large volume of them in this day and age, but you have it involving drug dealers. Sometimes it's cartel people looking to kidnap people that have assets and significant money, so they're looking for that remuneration. Sometimes they're fake in that somebody is planting and pretending that they've been a victim of kidnap so they can profit in another means. This one is unusual. It sets apart from the others. Clearly, we have an established, respected individual that has disappeared not by their own means, and somebody behind that is a criminal. The problem is we've had time go on and we haven't had communication, or at least the public hasn't been told about any communication. Maybe something's going on behind the scenes that law enforcement doesn't want us to know for reasons of the integrity of the case. But the longer things go on, the less optimistic I am. I remain hopeful.
As the investigation continues in Tucson, there is the other part of this story, which is the ransom demand. Unlike the shows we used to watch when we were growing up, the days where people would stuff $100,000 in unmarked bills into a suitcase and leave it behind a trash can are over. Reportedly, these people want $6 million in cryptocurrency. It's a crime that's been on the rise over the last few years called crypto kidnapping. Tonight, we're joined by Ari Redboard, who is a global head of policy at TRM Labs. That's a company that conducts forensic investigations on digital assets. He's also a former senior advisor to the Treasury Department and an assistant U.S. attorney who investigated and prosecuted terrorism and cases involving cryptocurrency and human trafficking. Good to have you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
The widely accepted assumption is that crypto is the ideal form of currency for a bad guy because it's tougher to track. Is that true?
It's an interesting paradox, and we'll sort of get to that in a moment. But the reality is every transaction involving cryptocurrency is trackable, traceable, and immutable, meaning it's forever on a public ledger. Blockchains, where cryptocurrency lives and moves, including Bitcoin, which is a public blockchain, every single transaction is there for the world to see. So any transaction that occurs with an address associated with this case or any other, we are able to track and trace the flow of funds in real time to build investigations. So when crypto is involved, law enforcement has a powerful investigative tool to track and trace.
All right, it looks like we're having some problems with our feed. Can you hear me okay? You broke up a little bit. Okay, good. If you were planning to kidnap someone, would you ask in 2026 for crypto or cash?
It's interesting. You mentioned the cash drop behind the garbage can scenario. And the reality is, when I was a prosecutor, I prosecuted cases involving bulk cash smuggling and networks of shell companies and high value art. There was no TRM, right? Our tool to track and trace those things for wire transfers or bulk cash. Today in crypto, you can track and trace the flow of funds on open blockchains. The challenge, however, for law enforcement investigators is bad actors are now able to move larger amounts of funds faster than ever before, but we can track and trace them. So the challenge really becomes this cat and mouse game that has always existed between law enforcement and bad actors. However, instead of playing out on roads and city streets, now it plays out on blockchains and across cyberspace, where we're racing against time to ultimately try to seize, interdict, and ultimately make arrests and investigations in cases like these.
And how do you connect the funds to a perpetrator ultimately so you can build a criminal case?
That's really the key question. So what was in this purportedly was in this ransom note was just the alphanumeric Bitcoin address. And unless there's some specific attribution, historic attribution, do we know anything about that address? And if not, really what has to happen is that address needs to transact with a cryptocurrency exchange. Cryptocurrency exchanges are like banks on blockchains. And they do the same type of know your customer information, right? They need to know your name, your date of birth, your address, your phone number, your email in order to open up an account. And the way law enforcement can really figure out who is the user, who is the individual behind that address, is to serve a subpoena on that cryptocurrency exchange. And that's when you really could get moving. That's when you could potentially identify an individual. And then you use all the tools and techniques law enforcement always uses. Can we do a subpoena or a search warrant to a Gmail account or to cell records? Can we triangulate cell tower data? And then you're really off and running. So the key is, does this address at some point, maybe before or after a payment is made, transact with a cryptocurrency exchange? Then you potentially have.
So Ari, is the point where they try
Information on that user.
Is the point where they try to trade in the crypto and convert it into currency or cash, is that the most vulnerable moment for the bad guy?
That's really the key moment. Can we identify who is behind that alphanumeric crypto address? And that is often most likely at the time that that bad actor wants to cash out. The reality is that you still really can't buy things in cryptocurrency today. You need to convert crypto to more usable traditional currencies, cash, fiat currency, right? And it's at that off ramp where we have the best chance of identifying the individual behind it, potentially interdicting funds, and maybe even making an arrest in a case like this.
Knowing what you know, if the crypto demand is legitimately from Nancy Guthrie's captor, is there a chance in your mind that they could actually outmaneuver authorities by continually and quickly moving that money from place to place to place?
It will ultimately be that race to off ramps. And law enforcement investigators, FBI, Homeland Security, IRS criminal investigations are some of the best crypto tracers in the world. And they have the tools like TRM and the training. So what they're doing, as soon as that payment is made, they will be tracking and tracing the flow of funds in real time to beat that actor to that off ramp. And that'll be the cat and mouse game that we have always really seen between law enforcement and bad actors. But we have the best in the world who are crypto tracers in the U.S. federal government and state and local today as well.
And let's say they were able to evade someone with advanced measures to track this. Once they have the crypto coin, how do they launder that money? And what is tumbling? Can you explain that?
Absolutely. So tumbling or mixers are sort of on-chain obfuscation techniques. You put funds into a service, it mixes it up with other funds and sends it out, basically laundered on the other side. However, what you have to remember is we keep talking about these on and off ramps. You can launder the funds all you want through mixers and in privacy coins and different types of obfuscation techniques on blockchains, but you still need to eventually find that on and off ramp. And that's where the tracing really comes in. Law enforcement is going to be using tools like TRM to follow the money. That's going to be through mixers and through other types of obfuscation techniques, and ultimately a race to the off ramp. So the key is not so much can they obfuscate the flow of funds on chain, it's can they beat law enforcement to those on and off ramp to those off ramps to convert the crypto to more usable fiat currencies. And I think that'll ultimately be the race. And it depends in large part how sophisticated these actors are. Do they just see Bitcoin as an opportunity? They spun up an account and they said, send the funds here. Or are these seasoned cyber criminals who really know how to use these types of obfuscation techniques?
And finally, Ari, based on what you know and we've seen, I think there was close to $1 billion in ransom paid a year or two ago globally. Does this feel like something that's happening from culprits out of the country or inside the U.S.?
You know, in large part, when we're talking about the classic sort of ransomware case, right? A hospital system or colonial pipeline from a few years back is attacked. These are essentially malware attacks. And most of those are ransomware gangs in Russia or elsewhere in Eastern Europe. So very, very different. But it still is this race between law enforcement, right? The U.S. company pays the ransom. This happened in Colonial Pipeline exactly. Law enforcement ultimately used TRM to track and trace the flow of funds to a wallet address that it was able to seize back. So no arrests in a case like that, right? Because you're not going to go, put anyone in handcuffs in places like Russia or North Korea or Iran or elsewhere, but you can seize the money back. And I imagine that those are very different cases, but it still involves the same type of tracking and tracing the flow of funds on blockchains.
Ari Redboard, thank you so much for your insight and expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
And as we wait for a break in this case, a global security expert says that ransom abductions in the United States are rare. And even when they do occur, they typically don't include several of the elements that investigators are now seeing in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Joe Dana is in Tucson tonight explaining why the location and the circumstances of this case make it a difficult crime to pull off. Joe?
Caribe, I'm about 10 minutes away from Nancy Guthrie's somewhat secluded neighborhood up here in northeast Tucson. Earlier, I spoke with Scott Stewart of Torchstone, a global firm specializing in ransom and kidnappings. He says, while rare, there are dozens of kidnappings along the U.S.-Mexico border annually. They typically involve Mexican Americans with deep ties to Mexico. He says the ransom amounts are $5,000 to $10,000. Most cases are not reported to police. I want to also show you a map here. There is that winding road where Nancy Guthrie's home sits, and there is considerable space between lots. Less of a chance of cameras to capture cars in the act of a crime, but Stewart points out a higher likelihood of neighbors noticing people or cars that are out of place in the days leading up to the attack. He talks about the importance of surveillance. It's crucial for criminals to create what he calls an attack cycle, a predictable time that they strike. And the two most direct options for hypothetical abductors would be straight to Mexico, about 70 miles, or more than 100 miles east to New Mexico. Stewart says no matter what, ransom criminals, they need to be very confident they can get around unnoticed before, during, and after an attack.
We saw in the kidnapping of Sidney Riso, many years ago, who was the CEO of Exxon. He lived in a very nice neighborhood in New Jersey. And in that case, there was actually a house under construction across from his residence that the kidnappers used for surveillance. They have to have some way of conducting that surveillance so that they can get the pattern of life down, of the target.
Stewart says another possible motive for an abduction, ideology. The fact the victim in this case is directly related to a member of the news media in what is a very politically charged environment cannot be ruled out as a potential motive. He says there is the point that ideological kidnappings typically involve some sort of manifesto, and of course we've seen no evidence of that here.
All right. Joe, thanks. Ahead on 12 News at 7, high-profile kidnappings have shaped the way that police investigate. We'll take a look back at some other notable cases and why their lessons still resonate years later.
"12 News Valley Cam, sponsored by Parker & Sons Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, and Electrical.
12 News and NBC News are your all-access pass to the Winter Olympics.
Already buzzing with excitement.
We're live in Milan with the athletes chasing gold and cheering on Team USA right here on 12 News.
When someone vanishes, history shows the most important clues are often not that far away.
In 2002, Elizabeth Smart was taken from her bedroom in Salt Lake City. She was seen in public multiple times, walking, talking, even passing police, but was not recognized as a kidnapping victim.
More than a decade later in Cleveland, a kidnapping case in Ohio shocked the nation. 3 women, missing for years, were found alive in a neighborhood home. Their kidnapper had been interviewed by police but then ruled out.
And experts say that these cases prove a hard truth, that kidnappings don't always happen in isolation, and they can happen in plain sight, while out for a hike or even dinner with friends. Today, investigators work to avoid some of the same misses by re-examining tips, questioning assumptions, and asking what might have been overlooked. And when someone is missing, of course, time is of the essence, and so does understanding the mind of the criminals involved.
Trem Mai talked with an expert to get some insight into that aspect of kidnappings.
Joining me now is psychologist Dr. Catherine Coleman, who is board certified in police and public safety. Dr. Coleman, thanks so much for joining us. Based on what you've seen and heard, what do you make of the kidnapper?
This is so interesting because unlike a lot of other investigations that we see, there's really been such limited information that's come out. I mean, we've gotten little glimpses here and there that reporters have released about the content of the ransom notes. And then we've gotten, just a handful of interviews from Savannah and her family members that have come out. When I'm looking at this, there's some things that stick out to me. I'm going to go ahead and guess that this was a team of people, just based on the fact of Nancy's size and potential immobility issues. So it's going to take a couple of people to remove her from the home. Interesting, one of the things that you and I have chatted about before too is the fact that there were 2 deadlines given. And when I see that, plus the fact that there's really been no proof of life thus far, I think about the motive here, right? And is money the true goal, or is it to torture this poor family?
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, we are looking at day 9, and there is a 4th public plea and desperation. You can see it in Savannah's face, just asking the public now to help more. Do you think the kidnappers wanted to target Savannah Guthrie because she's such a high-profile figure?
I mean, that has to be something. I mean, there's certainly wealthier people that they could have targeted, but I think that they probably chose somebody, in such a national spotlight, right? And she was supposed to go to the Olympics too, right? So international spotlight, everybody knows her. She's a household name, and so you have to understand that if you're targeting her family, this is going to get a lot of attention.
I know this is such a complicated case, and the Pima County Sheriff's Office, as well as the FBI, they are staying so tight-lipped. But I'm wondering, considering this is such a high-profile figure and the FBI is involved, there's so much national attention. Why is this taking so long?
I would put money on it that there is a lot of information that they are strategically choosing not to disclose to the public right now. They're likely relying on a lot of different tip lines. And when you do that, it creates such a strain on resources, and you're going to get a lot of bogus information coming in. And so the less that they can put out to the public, it's going to be easier to verify information coming in. And we've seen this in the past. Like, I immediately start thinking about the Idaho killings, right? And Brian Kohlberger, and how they sat on some of the information about his identity for a couple of days so that they could be strategic in how they wanted to go about capturing him. So it makes me wonder, okay, is there a lot more going on behind the scenes than we probably realize?
Yeah, and along those lines, I mean, I know you've worked extensively with law enforcement on many high-profile cases. Can you give us an idea of perhaps what investigators are going through right now? I mean, it seems a little frustrating. They have gone back to both homes, both Annie's home, the sister, and Nancy's home, the mother. And it seems as though, you think that kind of the investigation at the site of the crime scene is done, but then they keep going back repeatedly. What do you think is going on?
Oh, I mean, they're exhausted. They're exhausted. They're stressed out. They have an obligation to look into everything possible to try to solve this kidnapping. And hopefully, right, that's all that it is. But you can't really leave any stone unturned. And so they're working around the clock. Like I said, they're probably dealing with some bogus tips coming in from all over the country and all over the world, trying to figure out what's legitimate, what's not. And then you've also got, a family who is relying on you. That's a lot of pressure, and public who is constantly asking for answers.
And that deadline, I mean, we're talking about less than 25 minutes away now at 5 o'clock, that second deadline. What did you make of Savannah's fourth video?
So interesting. This one, it felt like she was talking to the general public, and not necessarily to the kidnappers. This was a plea for, if you know anything, it doesn't matter, if you are near Tucson or if you're anywhere in the US, if something seems unusual, if something doesn't seem right, please call law enforcement. It wasn't, hey, kidnappers, we want proof of life. We want to make sure that our mom's okay. And she had makeup on. I almost was like, maybe she's trying to show a level of strength, right? Because, like I said before, if this kidnapper's motive, if part of it is to psychologically torture the family, Savannah's maybe trying to rise above that, and put on a face that, okay, we have hope. We're going to try to see this through.
Yeah, she definitely seemed and came across stronger. And hopefully Nancy will be found still safe and sound.
Our coverage of the search for Nancy Guthrie continues around the clock, on air and online, and also streaming here on 12 Plus.
And just be sure to download 12 Plus on your TV so you can get the very latest updates in this investigation. And of course, stay with 12 News for the latest developments. Thanks again for watching our live extended coverage of the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie on 12 Plus.
We'll see you back here later on tonight for 12 News at 10.